My name is 𝐂𝐨𝐬𝐿 and I'm a research intern at the Institute of Chinese Studies, New Delhi. I warmly welcome you all to another edition of ICS's Wednesday seminar titled India-Pakistan Conflict and its Implications for China. In late April this year, a terrorist attack in �Pahalgam killed 26 civilians, triggering a severe escalation between Indian and Pakistani forces. India's counterstrike, Operation Sindoor, consisted of precision strikes, missile launches, and drone warfare. This confrontation disrupted important bilateral frameworks, including the Indus Water Treaty and the Shimla Agreement. A defining feature of this conflict was the debut of Chinese military systems. Pakistani forces deployed J-10C fighter aircrafts and PL-15E long-range missiles, which provided China with invaluable live-fire performance data. For China, this crisis posed a dual strategic challenge, safeguarding its BRI and CPEC investments while maintaining relations with both nuclear powers. Today's panel will discuss China's navigation of the India-Pakistan-China triangulation, the implication of the real-world testing of PLA hardware, and the broader strategic ramifications for the Indo-Pacific. We have two panelists for today. Ambassador T.C.A. Raghavan retired from the Indian Foreign Service in 2015 as High Commissioner to Pakistan. He has held multiple diplomatic postings in Kuwait, Bhutan, and the UK. He also holds a PhD in Indian Economic History from JNU, New Delhi. He is currently associated with the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies and NIAS, Bangalore. His work focuses on historical research, strategic affairs, and South Asian diplomacy. In addition to this, he is also the author of several acclaimed books, including Attendant Lords and The Circles of Freedom. Our second panelist for today is Dr. Atul Bhardwaj, who is a visiting fellow in the Department of International Politics at the City St. George's University of London. He holds a PhD in history from Ambedkar University and has done his master's in war studies from King's College London. He is alumni of the National Defence Academy, Pune, and served in the aviation branch of the Indian Navy for 2 decades. He has been writing a strategic affairs column in the Economic and Political Weekly since 2013 and is the founding editor of 2 defense magazines, Purple Beret and Salute. The chair for today's discussion is Dr. Hemant Adlakar, who is a professor of Chinese at the Center of Chinese and Southeast Asian Studies, JNU, New Delhi. He is also the vice chairperson and honorary fellow at ICS. His areas of research include political discourse in the PRC and modern Chinese literature and culture. He is also on the editorial board of China Report. Before I hand over to the chair, I would like to ask all participants to follow a few housekeeping rules. All participants shall be muted during the seminar. Questions may be posted in the chat box along with your name and affiliation. Alternatively, you may use the raise your hand option during the interactive session. You shall then be called upon to unmute yourself. Thank you. I now hand over to the chair. Over to you, Dr. Adlakar.
Nayanika, am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are.
Okay. Thank you. Let me again welcome our two very distinguished panelists, Ambassador Raghavan and Dr. Atul Bhardwaj. Before we open the panel by inviting the two panelists, let me very quickly lay down the premise based on some of my observation. As of course, it is known to all of us that despite the denials both in Islamabad and Beijing, it is very evident to everyone what is the role China played in the latest conflict between India and Pakistan in the early May. Now, the netizens in China, of course, they went ecstatic over their country's victory in the latest India-Pak air battle. And as was reported in the social media and the Chinese state media, the Chinese netizens, they flooded their social media with patriotic content and emotions. But however, authorities in Beijing remained cautious and distanced itself from the nationalist wave while the strategic affairs community in China was more concerned with this latest Indo-Pak conflict's impact on China's security and strategic interests. I mean, these are two aspects of our discussion today, which perhaps may not be very widely known to the Indians and the Indian readers of newspapers. Therefore, I thought that I'll mention these two things at the very outset. In fact, given the topic of today's panel discussion, that the post-Pahalgam India-China conflict and its implications for China, we had tried to mobilize at least one Chinese participant in today's discussion. We had initially, it seemed, succeeded, but because of some difficulties and technicalities, we could not get the Chinese participant with us today. But we are still trying. We hope that in the very near future, we will be able to succeed in inviting a participant from China. But anyway, as I said, that there are two aspects of the issue and the discussion we are having today that is very widely known to readers and audiences in India. One is that there was a lot of support on the Chinese social media in favor of India in the latest India-Pak conflict. And even some Chinese analysts, some Chinese strategic affairs experts, even they were taken in by surprise for this maybe small in size, but nonetheless a very solid support which India received on Chinese social media and not Pakistan. That is one which is, at least I have not seen much of this kind of reports being circulated in the Indian media. And the second aspect is that, of course, there is a lot of literature available about the Chinese involvement in the India-Pak, especially the India-Pak 3-day air battle post-Pahalgam. But very little do we see in the media analysis and commentaries that the Chinese strategic affairs community was seriously engaged in discussions and discourse over the implications of India-Pak, especially the latest India-Pak conflict, on China's national interest and strategic interest. I mean, this might come as a surprise to many. Many might not even imagine that there could be implications for Chinese interest, because their impression here is China was fully involved behind Pakistan, or China was fully standing along with Pakistan in this latest India-Pak conflict. So, as it is known now, that it was only after the 3-day airstrikes between India and Pakistan ended or came to a halt, well, by the way of ceasefire, that the extent to which India's northern hostile neighbor was directly or indirectly involved in the latest military conflict between the two largest South Asian nuclear weapon possessing countries. To an overwhelming majority of people in China, of course, as has been widely reported, the most eye-catching focus of this latest conflict was the downing of several Indian planes by the Chinese-made J-10C fighters and the PL-15 air-to-air missiles deployed by the Pakistan Air Force. China's reported operational support to Pakistan during its conflict with India highlights the changing military dynamics in South Asia and raises regional and global concerns about the alignment and capabilities of major power in South Asia in particular. Now, of course, China appears to have played a more active role, as already mentioned, in Pakistan's recent clash with India than that was previously known to us. However, military analysts and international observers, especially even in places like Taiwan, etc., they have noted that this combat use of advanced Chinese jets and missiles showcases Beijing's capabilities and influencing military planning and perceived balance of power even beyond South Asia. Interestingly, as I mentioned before, that Chinese media has expressed concerns on the possibility of escalation of tensions or the India-Pak conflict getting out of control, especially during the 3 days air battle. And there were a lot of discussion in the Chinese strategic affairs community and in the Chinese media that what happens to China or how China gets impacted if the India-Pak conflict escalates or gets out of control. So 4 major concerns regarding the impact of the latest India-Pak military conflict have been highlighted by the Chinese debates and discussions. And these 4 major areas of concern are military, security, political, and economic. I'll very briefly highlight some of these concerns one by one. In the military concerns, the India-Pakistan conflict poses a potential threat to China's border security. That is what the Chinese discussion highlights. For example, the Kashmir region borders China's Tibet and Xinjiang. So once the conflict gets out of control, the scope of military operations will expand and military confrontation will extend, which may put China's border directly under the threat of war and destroy the peaceful environment on China's borders. And security concerns, as highlighted in the Chinese discussions, are as follows. The deterioration of the regional security situation caused by the India-Pakistan conflict has brought challenges to China's energy security and border stability. India and Pakistan are both nuclear-armed countries, and once the situation gets out of control and evolves into a nuclear conflict, radioactive pollution may spread into China, endangering the safety of hundreds of millions of people, affecting the ecological barrier of the Qinghai-Tibet Plateau, threatening the water sources of the Yangtze River and the Yellow River. And besides, the India-Pak conflict may also cause the collapse of the global nuclear non-proliferation mechanism, giving Japan, South Korea, and other countries an excuse to possess nuclear weapons and completely subverting the security architecture in East Asia. And the political implications of the India-Pak conflict getting out of control and the concerns for China, as highlighted, are that China and Pakistan are all-weather strategic partners. The two countries have deep cooperation and mutual trust in many fields, such as politics, economy, and military. The construction of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, that is CPEC, is closely linked by the interests of the two countries. That is first concern. And the other major concern in political terms is that India often accuses China of favoring Pakistan. So this definitely then weakens China's neutral mediation role, if at all. And the third concern is that on the international stage, in order to promote its strategic interests, the United States has taken the opportunity to strengthen US-India military cooperation and tried to squeeze China's influence in the Indian Ocean. And the fourth political concern highlighted by these Chinese discussions and debates has been that the conflict has led to a deterioration in the security situation along the CPEC corridor. And last but not the least is the economic implications. Now, if the corridor, that is CPEC, how the CPEC corridor gets impacted. The conflict has led to a deterioration in the security situation all along the CPEC corridor, sorry. Now, if the corridor infrastructure is damaged or the project is stagnant, then China's tens of billions of dollars of investment in Pakistan will be in jeopardy, and the energy transportation channels may also be cut off. And the third major economic concern is that the conflict has led to regional turmoil and affected China's bilateral trade with India and Pakistan. The deterioration of the trade environment and the obstruction of logistics have increased trade costs and risks, reducing the willingness of companies on both sides to trade. And the final economic concern, if the conflict gets escalated, is that the international energy market and food market will also fluctuate due to the serious India-Pakistan military conflict, which will directly affect China's energy import costs and food security. So these were very brief highlights of some of the discussions which I saw or which I came across in the Chinese media and among the Chinese strategic affairs community on the implications or the impact of escalation of India-Pak conflict or India-Pak conflict getting out of control on the China's national and strategic interests. Now, with these very brief observations, I invite Ambassador Raghavan, our first panelist, to please make his opening remarks for 7 to 8 minutes. Thank you. Ambassador Raghavan, please take the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor. And may I begin by thanking the Institute of Chinese Studies for inviting me for this discussion today. And I'm very happy to be on this panel with Professor Bhardwaj and with you as chair. So thank you very much for those initial remarks, which I found quite novel and interesting because I have not heard that perspective, at least not come across it in our own media. And of course, there's always, by way of starters, when you talk about Chinese social media and the views expressed there and how they appear to be at variance from the views we normally expect, there is always a problem in relating media projections with policy or media projections with intentions. And we in India should know that better than anyone else, because if you look at the positions our own media took during the April-May crisis, it's quite bewildering in terms of how we relate that to policy perspectives or even policy analysis. So how you relate media trends or media positions to actual events and the actual evolving situation on the ground is quite a complex process, to my mind at least. But I'm very grateful that you provided that very rounded perspective in your opening remarks. It's quite obvious we are focusing a great deal on the Chinese role in this latest spike in India-Pakistan tensions. Because what has happened over the past 7-8 years, and to some extent this is at variance from the trend which had been there for the past 3 decades or at least a quarter century, is that there has been a simultaneous decline or simultaneous erosion in levels of trust with both these adversarial relationships. Your relationship with Pakistan has undergone a significant dip since 2016 and even more pronounced since 2019. And the India-China relationship also has suffered significant dips in this broad period, first over the Doklam crisis and then even more so post-Galwan with the Ladakh crisis on the line of actual control. So the fact that both these relationships underwent a significant dip makes us focus much more sharply on the Chinese role in this latest India-Pakistan confrontation in May this year. Now, some of the comments which have come from both official and non-official sources in India have very sharply focused on this Pakistan-China nexus and posited, if not in as many words, certainly have underlined the possibility of battlefield collusion to an extent that was not expected or anticipated. I think that really is the substance of what we are trying to discuss today. To my mind, we have to begin with from more fundamental premises, and which is that of the very strong nature of the Pakistan-China relationship since the 1960s. The details are all well known to us from 1963 to 1971-72. Thereafter, the role in the Chinese role in the Pakistan nuclear weapons program, also the revelations which emerged about the Karakoram highway in the late 1970s. So this fundamental congruence on many political and strategic issues between Pakistan and China started cementing from the late 1960s, and thereafter has crystallized even more strongly. As India-Pakistan asymmetries became more evident from the late 1990s, at the same time, we also noticed that the India-China asymmetry started emerging at that time, and that became a kind of source of strength for Pakistan in what they described as being standing up to hegemonic or bullying behavior from India. So these asymmetrical triangles between India, China, and Pakistan also started solidifying from the late 1990s. The Pakistan-China relationship also started transforming very, very quickly from the early years of this century. In my own recollection, when I first went to Pakistan in 2003, my impression was, and this came from staying there and interacting with many Chinese diplomats and military officers who were posted in diplomatic positions in the Chinese embassy in Pakistan, and also getting a sense of how the Chinese and the Pakistanis interacted with each other. My sense in 2003, early 2004 was, and this was a subjective assessment, that the most important person in the Chinese embassy was the Chinese defense attaché or the Chinese military attaché. It was clearly a very, very strongly military-oriented and political relationship. When I went back to Pakistan about a decade later, in 2013, 2014, I found that I had to revise this assessment, because what was essentially a political and military relationship was transforming very quickly into a very strong economic relationship. A political and military relationship was also acquiring a very strong economic character, and this was happening simultaneously with the erosion of Pakistan's own economy and its growing trend towards dysfunctionality. To me, it seemed that the Chinese were very conscious of Pakistan's growing dysfunctionality and the different kinds of crisis it was facing. And they were determined to do whatever they could to stop this slide into dysfunctionality and the state system itself becoming weak and eroded. And not very surprisingly, in 2015, 2016, we saw a large number of Chinese economic packages tied up together in the form of the China-Pakistan economic corridor. But simultaneously, the military relationship had also been receiving a great deal of attention throughout. And it's well known, for instance, that the JF 17 co-production began towards the end of the first decade, and thereafter this aircraft or this platform has become one of the principal bases of the Pakistan, principal pillars of the Pakistan Air Force. And every year, the complexity of the exercises between the Pakistani Air Force and their Chinese counterparts, that complexity has been increasing and also increasing in frequency. At the same time, while Pakistan had been reliant on a large number of countries for their armaments procurements, again from the from early 2000s onwards, Chinese arms transfers to Pakistan go up very, very rapidly and are far in excess by of those from other countries. Within these arm transfers, if one looks up the breakup, you find that the PAF, or the Pakistan Air Force, leads the pack. That it becomes the principal recipient of different Chinese military air platforms, beginning from the JF-17, but there were other platforms also, air defense systems, advanced avionics. From the air exercises that were regularly carried out, it was also evident that there was a great concentration on interoperability for at least a decade and a half. And that all the different systems which were being procured from China or existing systems which Pakistan already had were being integrated quite strongly. And because the JF-17 was one of their principal platforms, integration, to my mind, proceeded very, very smoothly and very strongly with these different air exercises taking place, and the Pakistan Air Force using all their other resources and tying it up with the JF-17 and the other Chinese systems they were using. My short point is, I'm not a military man. I don't wish to go into that much detail. My short point is that we should not be surprised at the extent of Pakistan-China interoperability, which was evidenced, as we claim, during this time. It was something which was entirely to be expected. I'm not quite sure what the commotion is quite about. The fact is that the Pakistan-China relationship has emerged over the past 5-6 decades as a very, very strong strategic partnership, regardless of all the major geopolitical changes which have taken place in South Asia, in Pakistan's relations with Afghanistan, in Pakistan's relations with the United States, in Pakistan's relations with Iran, keeping aside for the moment the India-Pakistan relationship. There's been an extent of constancy in the Pakistan-China relationship which strongly underwrites the strength of the strategic partnership. Notwithstanding all the other geopolitical shifts, and there have been major geopolitical shifts in the 1970s, 1980s, and even more so in this century, this partnership has remained pretty uniform in its content, in its military content, in its economic content, and in its political content. And therefore, we should expect that the extent of cooperation between the two militaries will be very, very significant. And it's not something we should be surprised about. I think my final point is that from a military planning point of view, have I exceeded the time? May I take a minute more?
Yeah, please. You can wind up in another minute. Yeah.
From a military and a defense point of view, I think to plan for a China-Pakistan nexus or a China-Pakistan collusion is something which is entirely entirely required, which is fully required, and is something which we should be doing all the time. But I keep repeating that planning from a defense point of view is one thing, but we should not fall into the trap of a self-fulfilling prophecy and expect that the Chinese position and the Pakistani position on all issues will be directly antithetical to our positions, or that, in brief, that while we should plan for two fronts, or we should plan for a unified single front consisting of both our adversaries, we should not make that into a self-fulfilling prophecy. At the height of the Galwan crisis in Ladakh, which was the most serious dip in the India-China relationship in at least 3 or 4 decades, at that very time, India and Pakistan found it expedient to reaffirm a ceasefire on the line of control. Now, adherents of the two-front situation, or those who automatically posit a Pakistan-China nexus, military nexus, to pressurize India, have no satisfactory explanation for this development. The point is that Pakistan and China have a very, very strong strategic, political, and military relationship. And I'm summing up now. I don't think we should be surprised at the extent of interoperability their systems and their service and their forces have shown, because the Pakistanis were able to use the latest Chinese technologies to their advantage. If indeed that was so, is something which we should be prepared for, and certainly we should have been prepared for. And on that basis, we should not make policies towards either country which will end up putting us in positions where conflict becomes more likely or more possible, rather than the relationships getting stabilized. I'll stop with that.
Okay. Thank you, Ambassador Raghavan. You have really raised quite a few very, very important, very insightful observations, and raised some very fundamental questions, which I'm sure will require further discussion. And I'm expecting a lot of questions from the floor addressed on these points. Now, let me turn to our second panelist, Dr. Atul Bhardwaj. And since our initial time limit has not helped us much, so Atul, you also may take 7 to 10 minutes to make your opening remark, and then we will open the discussion among the panelists. So Atul, please, floor is yours.
My apologies, I didn't realize I took so much. So much time.
It's all right. It was very interesting, very, very welcome. Yeah.
No. I'll take a little less, in fact, so we'll even out. Thank you, ICS, for inviting me to this and panel discussion. It's an interesting topic. It's a very topical issue which is being discussed in the media. Initially, after the Trump announced the ceasefire on the Twitter, the whole the wrath of the Indian social media was directed towards America, basically. And people were discussing how America has failed us, and you can't really trust America. So that was the narrative which had emerged immediately after the war. And with General Munir going and meeting Trump and sitting with him and having lunch, the anti-American sentiment in India was at its peak. Now, of late, I've been seeing the media and which is the narrative has shifted absolutely with especially with the General Rahul Singh, who's our Deputy Chief of Army Staff, speaking at a seminar and talking about how the Chinese were giving sort of satellite intelligence to the Pakistanis even during the ceasefire. So looking at the whole thing, one is really surprised what we are actually dealing with. One issue is, of course, the military issue that we had not. When we thought about the two front war, we always thought probably both there may be a situation when China and Pakistan will attack us simultaneously, and we'll be left actually in a difficult situation where we'll have to engage our militaries at two fronts. What we had not conceived was this kind of the Chinese involvement, with the Pakistanis. And that's why it is a surprise for us. We had not thought about how the Chinese satellites or how the Chinese missiles or their other aircraft would collaborate to give Pakistan an edge in the war. So this is something new to us. And because the world over, this is actually new to the world, the way the Chinese systems and the Chinese aircraft and the Chinese missiles, very networked and, exchanging data with each other, have been able to, has surprised the world in the sense, because it's a sort of a deep seek movement for the Chinese weaponry, I would say. And the Western world is really looking at this whole issue of how China has been able to network its systems, which India, of course, finds it a little difficult because the Chinese inventory now, if you see, is exclusively Chinese. The Pakistani, Air Force inventory is exclusively Chinese. So therefore, the networking and the systems interacting with each other, the interoperability is much better for them. We operate different kinds of aircraft. We operate Soviet aircraft. We operate French aircraft. So sometimes this interoperability issues we've not been able to sort out, and the whole thing is in the process at the moment. But this is one of the lessons from that particular war, that you cannot take the Chinese military. It's no longer a conventional military. It's now a near peer to the American military, you can say. So you are not just confronted with an economic power, an economic superpower on your borders, but you're also confronting now a military power, a serious military power, which is equipped with latest technologies, which has incorporated the latest artificial intelligence and other things, and networking issue within its fold. So this is a lesson that we must draw, and this is something that India needs to really worry about and think about it, and how to really meet this particular challenge. Your air defense systems, in this particular war, we saw that we never attacked. There was never any mention about attacking any infrastructure created within the CPEC corridor, the China-Pakistan economic corridor. So we did not attack that. So there should not have been any direct involvement of the Chinese. Yet, since Pakistan has been operating with them, since Pakistan is buying their equipment, Pakistan does training with them. Therefore, it's but natural for them to have this kind of facilities available from China. We should not be surprised about it. We should be prepared for it. Therefore, and then again, America, during the war, it also came that one of our missiles hit the Noor Khan Air Base, which of course, and then it was said by some Pakistani general that the Noor Khan base actually belongs to America. The America occupies that Noor Khan base and operates it. So therefore, that could have been one of the reasons for America getting in and trying to stop the war. So the whole issue here is that Pakistan today, if you see, it is actually following a very typically non-aligned policy. it's the proverbial that clever calf which is sucking milk from two cows. And most intriguing part is that it is able to do this very easily, and it did not incur, India internationally. India was blamed for attacking Pakistan. So one saw in this whole thing that the Pakistan is actually gaining from all ends. So therefore, it becomes difficult to understand as to why, first of all, America, why is America aiding Pakistan, despite its closeness to China? Why does America continue to be friends with Pakistan, despite its military alliance with China? On the other hand, we see that when India tries to engage with China, America does not give us that kind of a leeway. America is, worried about. They want us to be a counterpoise to China, which has been there from 1950s onwards. They've always played this game of trying to make us a counterpoise to China. But in Pakistan's case, I would like to ask Ambassador Raghavan also, because I am not able to understand this entire policy. They have been the way they nudged us towards the Soviet Union and did not bother about us. Similarly, one sees that that America is sort of nudged Pakistan towards China, yet it retains the controls in Washington. Washington still controls Pakistan, but gradually Pakistan seems to be slipping out of America's fold, because if you see the number of students which go to China, is much more, is about 25,000 students have been going to China from Pakistan, in comparison to just 10,000 Pakistani students going to America. So there is a linkages being formed, cultural linkages being formed, and Pakistan is sort of slipping out of America's hold. Although, yet the Pakistani elite is more intricately tied to America than they are to China. But gradually things are changing, because I just heard that the Pakistani stock exchange, 40% of the Pakistani stock exchange is owned by a consortium of 3 Chinese businesses, and they have their 3 directors Chinese directors are there in the Pakistani stock in the board, this stock exchange board. So the Chinese involvement has grown immensely, as Ambassador Raghavan also told us, that this has been happening since the 60s. But why no Western power has taken cognizance of it? Is the issue which one needs to understand from India's perspective. Another problem with us is that when we focus too much on China, we see that none of our think tanks, or for that matter strategic community, is focused on how American involvement is there in Pakistan, the extent of American involvement in Pakistan. That, of course, is a matter which has not been studied. So we'll be able to arrive between this triangular relation in China, Pakistan, and America only if we are able to understand the full extent of both China and American involvement in Pakistan. Similarly, we saw that we were so surprised when we saw that a coup has been, America has been able to manage a coup in Bangladesh. So we never expected America to do that. So we are generally surprised by these things, and I think we need to devote a little more time in understanding these dynamics. And if you see the Chinese, are really worried, because they've invested a lot of amount in Pakistan. CPEC is their flagship BRI project, and Pakistan's proximity to the Pakistani elite's proximity to Washington is a cause of trouble for the Chinese also. And the Chinese fear that I'm sure Hemant would be able to tell us what the Chinese social media talks on this particular issue of the continued proximity of the Pakistani elite to Washington. So in that context, it becomes important for us to understand this whole dynamics, because without understanding this triangular relationship, I don't think we'll be able to arrive at a strategy which will be effective in that sense. With this, I'll end, and I would we can have more question answer sessions. We can discuss the issues.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Atul. That was very, very interesting. And I'm glad that by posing a question to Ambassador Raghavan and also throwing a question at me, you have very smoothly and happily replaced my role and started asking questions already. Although we were keeping the asking question among the panelists as the second round. But anyway, now since we are into the second round, Ambassador Raghavan, you must have also noticed that Atul has already asked you a question during his opening remarks. And let me quickly recap the question for you, that why is it that the American closeness with Pakistan, especially when Pakistan has been moving closer to China, and also the American-Pakistan relationship. Atul gave many examples why it is not being so thoroughly looked at or studied in India, or at least there is no much public discussion in India on that. This is a question. Atul, please correct me if I summed up wrongly your question to Ambassador Raghavan.
No, but that's what exactly I've asked. Basically,
Okay.
this understanding this triangular relationship.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
And why America continues to tolerate Pakistan going closer to China, and it doesn't tolerate us engaging with China.
Okay. And in addition to this question to you put up by Atul, Ambassador Raghavan, I have a small question to you as well. That I mean, going by the topic of our discussion today, it says that India-Pak conflict and its implications for China. So, as I had pointed out in my opening remarks and setting the premise for discussion, I think I'm still expecting some comments from our panelists on. I mean, one, of course, many people in India might be surprised that the Chinese are concerned about in what way the India-Pak conflict, if it gets out of control, can have implications for China. And so can we have some comments from our panelists on some of the concerns which I highlighted? So that in a way tells us that perhaps China does not want the India-Pakistan conflict to get out of control. I mean, is that assessment correct? And why so? Ambassador Raghavan?
Well, thank you. On the first question, with regard to Pakistan and the United States, you see, Pakistan and the United States had very, very strong relations till about 2010, till the end of this first decade of this century. And because it was a relationship which, again, had been forged over a number of decades, it's something which we took as a given. That, I mean, our view then was that basically the Americans decide what's happening in Pakistan, and Allah, America, and the army control Pakistan. Thereafter, from 2012 to 2013, Pakistan-US relations underwent a serious dip. And this really started becoming very, very visible 2018 onwards. And many of you will recall that famous tweet of President Trump on New Year's Day in 2018 that Pakistan is deceitful and it's playing a double game and this is going to stop. And thereafter, in 2021, 2022, following the US withdrawal from Afghanistan, that relationship in a way had hit rock bottom. I think we have to be clinical about how relationships change. The US-Pakistan relationship underwent a serious dip, but there was a stage at which that dip was going to bottom out. And we have now crossed that stage. It is unrealistic to expect that the United States, which has global interests, will ever will ever put itself in a position for a long period of time when it does not have strong and major relationships with the fifth largest country in the world. Pakistan is the fifth largest country in the world. It's situated in a sensitive geopolitical part of the globe, given overall US interests in the Gulf, in Iran, in West Asia, in South Asia, in China. So the Chinese, the Pakistani location is very, very important. And it has nuclear weapons. So given these factors, it is I think, inevitable that the United States China Pakistan relationship will not remain at this zero relationship stage, which it was in 2020, 2021. I think many people in India convinced themselves that that the US has written off Pakistan. That was not so. And as I said, the bottoming, the turning point, the bottoming out has now reached its. The downward trend has bottomed out, and we will now see an upward trend in the Pakistan-US relationships. With the other, there will be. It's not as if it will be ever be a smooth kind of process, but I think that relationship should not be written off as having no political significance or no strategic significance for us. Why does the United States tolerate it, given its strong relations with, given Pakistan's strong relations with China? I think the United States has come to accept that all countries want to maximize their strategic autonomy, just like we want to have a strong economic relationship with China while building up a political and military relationship with the Americans. The Pakistanis also try to play their cards so that they have a certain amount of autonomy in different relationships, which they will try to safeguard and build up to the best of their capacity. The second question about how should we view the India-Pakistan relations, as how does China view it? I think to some extent what you're saying perhaps may be the case, that the Chinese do not want a serious military confrontation right at their borders. At the same time, I don't think a relationship, a perfectly cordial relationship between Pakistan and India is also something that they will actively work towards. I think they are sufficiently conscious of the fact that there are deep rifts between India and Pakistan, and it will never really be a problem-free relationship. And to a great extent, that is to their strategic advantage. At the same time, they will try to play a role so that conflict remains within certain well-established limits and does not escalate beyond those.
Okay. Thank you, Ambassador Raghavan. Would you have a question for Atul?
No, Hemant, can I answer your question first on how it's going to impact China as such? So while they, basically China at the moment has not entered politically sort of entered playing a larger role in the world. But the fact is, with its military power now growing and with its military equipment, with its military exports now increasing, China will not be able to not play a political role in the world. No longer it can claim that it is not playing any, it is not getting involved in the world politically, and it's only an economic player in the world. Because with this, we've recently seen that even the Iranians have bought the Chinese planes, and they've preferred them over the Russian planes. The Chinese have sort of proved their technology, just as they proved their entry into the artificial intelligence world with the DeepSeek. This particular war has actually given them a kind of, a sort of a boost to their military exports, I would say. The stocks of the company which is producing these missiles went up. We saw that happening during the war. It may have come down later, but that's the kind of narrative which was built. So Chinese do not want a war at the moment in the area because they have their involvement in the CPEC. They don't want, because any India-China war, next India-China war is likely to if it goes into the civilian areas, or if it starts attacking installations beyond military installations, then the CPEC would be impacted. Chinese will definitely be worried. We've seen that happening. When the Chinese foreign minister recently went to Europe, he said that he does not want Russia to be defeated because if Russia is defeated, then his entire investments in Eurasia gets jeopardized. So the Chinese are very clear that they need to protect their investments, just as the Americans say that their navy is spread all across the world just to prevent their investments and across the world. So similarly, Chinese are also bothered about their investments. They do not want Indo-Pak war. And of course, Indo-Pak war, if it becomes very ugly and becomes nuclear, that would impact the entire world. It would not be limited here. It'll be very ugly event for the whole global security as such and peace as such. So that, of course, nobody wants in the world. Neither India wants. I'm sure the Pakistanis would also not like that to happen. So, so that is the extent. So war and especially with China already, the entire Chinese investments in Eurasia are impacted. With at one end, Ukraine involved, it's two of its allies are now involved in wars. One is Iran, which is involved in a war. And then on the other hand, you see Russia involved in a war. So Chinese position is relatively weak in that sense, because two of its major allies are involved in a war. If its third ally, Pakistan, also gets in a war, it's a quasi ally, I would say, also gets in a war, then it becomes a problem for China. And China does not want that, because that weakens China to a large extent. So that's my answer.
Very interesting. That's a very interesting observation, that China's two major allies are involved in an ongoing war, and therefore China would definitely not be happy with another or perhaps the only ally left, that is Pakistan, also getting involved in a war, and that too on China's borders, as Ambassador Raghavan pointed out. Very interesting points. Now, let me throw a common question to both the panelists, which again, I'm not sure whether it is part of the public discourse or discussion in India on the India-Pak conflict and its China's involvement. For example, I mean, as I mentioned, that within hours of the reports coming that Pakistan Air Force has downed several of India's fighter jets, and this was almost created a mini euphoria on the Chinese social media, and there were huge celebrations on China's victory. Now, this is widely reported, of course, but what is not equally widely reported is that initially, of course, the Chinese media and the Chinese state media also, and the Chinese social media also, they had mocked India and India going down fighting with Pakistan Air Force, for that matter. But on a serious note, I mean, this was for fun. But on a serious note, the celebrations in Chinese media discussions on what China achieved, the victory, the so-called victory China achieved in the Indo-Pak conflict, was not that the India was made fun of having lost a couple of fighter jets to Pakistan. I mean, this was just for fun, for temporary fun. But the major celebration of this victory was that it was the Rafale planes which were shot down. And many Chinese analysts celebrated this as that this is the first Chinese military victory over the West since the Opium War. And this is the first step. And that was being celebrated. And this was the DeepSeek movement. I mean, Atul referred to a DeepSeek movement in this whole combat of the Air Force, Pakistan Air Force with the Indian Air Force, and China victory, so-called China victory, because China enabled Pakistan in this air battle with India. But what I'm saying is that the real celebration in the Chinese media was not because India lost few planes to Pakistan, because they knew these planes are not Indians. And the celebration was that for the first time since the Opium War, a first step towards taking revenge of the century of humiliation has been achieved. This was being celebrated on a larger scale than India being made mocked at. So this is something which I thought I'll bring up in today's discussion. If our panelists have anything to comment on that this is the Opium War in the background, and Chinese are celebrating that they have started now militarily taking a revenge on the West.
I think this is too far-fetched, if they're celebrating it and celebrating it as that big a victory. Downing of one plane does not mean that they've achieved victory over the entire Western systems, warfare systems, which I would not agree with. Of course, yes, of course, even the West sees that. The West also saw this as basically, the Chinese systems, proving their efficacy against the Western aircraft. Of course, that is seen. But it would be too far-fetched to imagine that China has won any war kind of a thing against the Western systems. It's just that, yes, of course, the one thing is, of course, their military-industrial complex is being taken a little more seriously across the Western world. Earlier, it was their cars, which, EV cars, their solar systems, and their, other things which were making waves. But now even their military-industrial complex is making waves in the West now, which of course is one of the outcomes, I should say, a positive outcome for China in that sense.
Okay, Ambassador Raghavan?
Well, to my mind, we have to be on our guard, against accepting either Chinese narratives or Western narratives or any other narratives. I think, to say that it was Chinese victory because the aircraft were Chinese, it's like saying, in the past, the Pakistanis have used American aircraft and been worsted in air battles. That doesn't mean that it was an American defeat. I think we have to give agency to the country which is using these systems. And just like when our aircraft do well, we don't say it's a French victory. On that same ground, we have to, recognize that our adversary is our nationals of the country who are operating those platforms. It's not the platforms. The platforms are inanimate objects. The agency comes from those who can use them effectively, integrate them across different systems, and then operate well in battlefield conditions. So I think we have to, get out of this narrative. That narratives are everything. Narratives are important, but as I said in the beginning, how you relate social media narratives to actual reality can be quite complex. If you just go by Indian narratives of what happened during Operation Sindhu, we won't be having this discussion at all. Because the Indian media narrative was something quite different. So just like we discount our media narratives or our social media narratives as being inspired by hyper-nationalism and are getting carried away, we have to discount all these other social media narratives, whether from Pakistan or from China or in fact from any other country.
Okay. No,
I would agree. Hemant, I would fully agree here with Ambassador Raghavan, because, especially the scholarship must be able to, immune itself from these narratives which are continuously changing, and their narratives are always being advanced with a purpose. So I think the scholarship needs to be really like the judges, when they are taking a decision, they have to be, sort of keep themselves away from these kind of media pressures and what is happening in the social media, what is being thrown in the social media, the narratives which are being built. So, or in the mainstream media or in the social media. So similarly, I think the scholarship also needs to focus on this particular issue, how to, sort of not attach themselves, or to sort of, attached detachment sort of a thing has to be followed when you're looking in the media.
Okay. I mean, both your opinions well taken. The only reason why I brought this into the discussion was that because, for example, the Chinese media, I'm not talking of social media, I'm even talking of the mainstream media and the state media, the print media. There was no mention of Pak victory over India in this air battle, especially in the first 24 hours. Of course, by the third day, the situation changed. And nobody in the Chinese media discussed about how the situation was completely reversed by the third day. Their focus was only on the first 24 hours. That is number one. Number two, even on the first 24 hours, they were not saying it that this is the Pak victory. So this is interesting. They are saying this is the Chinese victory. Pak Air Force might have used perhaps the Chinese jet fighters, but they are celebrating the Chinese victory. They are not celebrating the Pak victory. So, I mean, I agree. Ambassador Raghavan mentioned that this, of course, reflects the Chinese hyper-nationalism, if they look at it in this way. And as you also said, that this does not actually mean that it is the Chinese victory over the West, especially in military terms. But what I'm trying to say is that if they are building this narrative, this has another dimension. And that dimension is that if within hours of this Pakistan-India air battle, in which the Pakistani propaganda claimed on the very first day that so many Indian jet fighters have been down, and China started celebrating it, my point is simply that does not that speak of some kind of a Chinese involvement on the side of Pakistan in a very pre-planned manner? That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying it was spontaneous, that the news came that the Pak Air Force has downed Indian fighter planes and China started celebrating Chinese victory. That is what I was indicating. Anyway, we can leave it at that, as we have to now move into the open question and answers round. We are already now past 4 o'clock. So let us go to the questions from the floor. And may I request Nayanika to read out if there are any questions in the chat box, please?
Yes, sir. There are 2 questions. The first question is from Ayushi. She asks if this Pahalgam incident and implications of conflict in any way will affect the decision of disengagement that was taken last year.
And is this question addressed to any specific speaker?
No, sir. It's an open-ended question.
Okay, so I leave it to both the panelists, whoever wants to reply to this question.
Ambassador Raghavan, if you'd like to take one.
To my mind, it won't have any impact on the disengagement process. I think, it's quite evident that not everything which happens in the India-Pakistan interface impacts the India-China interface, or the India-China interface impacts the India-Pakistan interface. Often, these two interfaces function at some distance from each other. And one example of that was something I already mentioned, that India and Pakistan agreed to reaffirm the ceasefire on the line of control at a time when things were really stretched on the line of actual control between India and China. So I don't see everything which is happening on the line of actual control having an immediate and direct impact on our relations with Pakistan and vice versa.
Okay.
Yes.
Atul, would you like to comment on this question as well?
No, it's fine. I'll comment on the Ambassador has answered it.
Okay. The next question, please.
Yes, so the second question is by Shriyansh, who's a research assistant here at the ICS, and the question is addressed to Dr. Bhardwaj. India's Indo-Pacific focus has given it a seat at the global high table, but it has risked ceding ground in its own backyard. China, with its BRI as a masterstroke, has woven a web of influence that New Delhi must now navigate with dexterity. The consequences of this shift are profound because it leaves the South Asia where India's voice, once dominant, now competes with Beijing's. Has India's global push come at the cost of its regional dominance?
Atul?
Of course, with the rise of China, our regional involvement and our dominance has considerably reduced, I would say. It was always challenging for us because we never had that kind of resources to manage our neighborhood. Although we always played big brother because we were the big brother in the region, and China was sort of dominant throughout the Cold War because it was not capable enough to enter the region. But after it's become economically more powerful, it has entered the region in a big way, and we have to sort of and we do take our foreign policy does take cognizance of this particular fact that China is there in our neighborhood in a very big way. One of the most intriguing part of China is that it is operating in a very hostile. It is invested, and as for example, CPEC is located in a very hostile zone between India and Pakistan. Yet, sort of China is not being really afraid of investing in these particular areas. Similarly, if you see Bangladesh, for that matter, China has not really refrained from investing in that particular area. So China is taking risks, has taken risks to get itself involved in the region. And that is, of course, that India could learn a little bit more. That we need our risk-taking abilities. We need to enhance our risk-taking abilities within the region, because, like, if you see the moment, at one hand, the Pakistani general was going to Washington and to meet Trump, and on the other hand, we saw Xi Jinping having a trilateral meet with the Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Nepalese heads. So it knows that there is a Western involvement everywhere. They know that the Indian involvement is there in the region, yet they have not refrained from getting involved in the region. So this is something which we must try to understand, that why Chinese are not really, are taking risks in getting involved in this particular region, despite the region not really, having come out of its Cold War kind of connections. So that is.
Okay. Ambassador Raghavan, would you like to come in on this question as well?
Well, I would say that the situation in South Asia has really deteriorated from our perspective in the last 4 or 5 years. Now, I don't think that deterioration has happened because of our quote-unquote global push, but certainly that over the past 3 or 4 years, this downside in many of our bilateral relationships and also in the internal situation in many countries in our neighborhood, that is a fact. So to that extent, there is no doubt that regionalism, our overall region is in a pretty bad state. On the one hand, because of the erosion of internal stability in Myanmar, that has placed BIMSTEC to some extent in a crisis situation, and all our connectivity corridors are impacted by that. Similarly, what happened in Bangladesh has also impacted BIMSTEC, and our bilateral relationship also with Bangladesh is, going through a very rocky phase. The relationship with Pakistan has been in the refrigerator since 2016, and because of that, SAARC is in a virtually in the freezer. So all of this put together, South Asia is, there's certainly somewhat lost as a region. In that context, the Chinese are making major inroads, both in bilateral relationships as also in terms of regional narratives and regional narratives concerning South Asia. So we have to ponder over to what extent this narrative vacuum in South Asia, and this narrative vacuum is about regional cooperation. To what extent is it going to work in our advantage in the medium term? To my advantage, to my mind, this cannot work to our advantage. It can only be to our disadvantage, and we should take steps to fill that vacuum. We cannot leave a narrative vacuum in our immediate region and expect other countries will not come in to fill it.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, please, Nayanika?
Yes, sir, there are three more.
Okay.
The next one is also addressed to Dr. Bhardwaj. Has India lost its neighborhood first policy to China's growing influence in South Asia?
Atul?
I would say the ambassador is more equipped to answer this question. I heard one of his talks at Prime Minister's Library on this particular issue only, on our neighborhood, and he's an expert on that. But yes, of course, we don't have that kind of resources to invest the way the Chinese are investing. You can't really boss, and plus now they have an alternative. Earlier, we were, whatever little we could provide, we were providing, we were engaging with them. But now China, of course, is investing. It has got the money to invest, and now we've seen it is also giving them the military equipment. So now things are becoming a little more difficult. I'm sure the ambassador would add to this.
Ambassador Raghavan?
You see, if you look at the way the India-China economic relationship has progressed in the last 20 years, from virtually zero in 2001, 2002, it is now like a huge colossus. I mean, just the size of our bilateral trade with China. It's unrealistic to expect that if this is happening with India, it would not happen with our neighbors. And you can hardly say to our neighbors that, no, don't develop your economic relations with China because it's not in our interest. It's not feasible to take that position. So yes, the Chinese economic impact and the Chinese, offer a template for modernity. In a period of 25, 30 years, they moved hundreds of millions of people out of near subsistence level to near middle class level. Whether you like it or not, that provides a narrative of modernity to your neighbors and to other developing countries. And to some extent, it provides a narrative of modernity to many in India too. I remember traveling over some years ago. Now I think with the recent dip in relations, things may have changed. But you go to even small towns and you find the number of institutions offering Chinese language classes is quite extraordinary. So the Chinese economic impact on South Asia is comprehensive, and it is obviously going to have a certain political impact also because of that. But that does not mean that your influence gets reduced to nothing. No, it doesn't, because you have also enormous influences across South Asia and across Southeast Asia. The point is that you should be prepared to use those influences and not leave vacuums. By putting SAARC in the freezer, you have opened the door for the Chinese to enter and come in a way which should not have been allowed. And that is because you have withdrawn. Now, what has happened in BIMSTEC is not because of your policy, but it has happened because of internal changes in Myanmar. But nevertheless, again, in BIMSTEC, there is going to be a vacuum emerging, which will mean others will step into it. So you should not leave these vacuums or these narrative gaps in your neighborhood. And while you will not be able to be a substitute for the Chinese economy, you also have enormous strengths, in terms of your own developmental experience, in terms of your cultural projection, in terms of your understanding your own neighborhood. And we should be prepared to act on that and not simply confine ourselves to bilateral dealings with each of our neighbors. there is a role for a regional envelope, and we should be prepared to play that role.
Okay. Next question, please, Nayanika.
Yes, sir. The next question is by 𝐂𝐨𝐬𝐿, who's a doctoral fellow at the 𝐈𝐧𝐝𝐢𝐚 program. She asks, many in Chinese news media have also described the India-Pakistan conflict as a proxy war between China and the USA, which has resulted in an American defeat. This can be broadly related to China's recent white paper on national security, which explicitly stated that anti-China Western forces are leaving no stones unturned to suppress and encircle China. Her question is that how has this conflict registered into China's understanding of the global security situation?
Okay. And is this addressed to anyone in particular?
No, sir.
Okay.
Um,
So,
you know,
Atul?
So, as I tried to explain earlier, that this conflict, of course, China sees, if one is to see the Iran as well as the Ukrainian conflicts, as I explained earlier, basically at each end of the Eurasian corridor, if you see. So that is that directly is America inching towards China or trying to weaken China with weakening its allies. So similarly, China obviously sees another of its allies getting engaged in a war. Basically, weakens it. It weakens its international position. And also, it raises doubts in the minds of the other members of the global South whether China is an effective counterpoise to the American hegemony. So in that sense, of course, but this particular war to be seen as China-India, the India-Pakistan war to be seen as a China-America conflict, I think it is a bit exaggerated to imagine that. It's not really this particular thing. Of course, the Israel-Iran, one could say, is definitely related to the larger China-American rivalry, but not this particular 4-day conflict. I would not say that.
Ambassador Raghavan, would you like to comment on this? Whether is this a part of the American design to squeeze China further?
Well, I think the American desire to contain China is quite clear. But I'm not sure whether the India-Pakistan conflict had any role in that. I don't think we should try to integrate, what is happening at the sub-regional level directly to what happens in terms of overall global shifts. The India-Pakistan dynamic has had a independent existence for a long period of time. So it's not easy to relate it to global shifts and global strategic issues that easily.
Okay. I think, yes, I would also tend to go along with both you and Atul, that it would be perhaps far-fetched, and as Atul said, that may be exaggerated, to bring in the American dimension here to put either more pressure on China or to squeeze China. As Atul had said, that if you look at, on the one hand, at in the Eurasian end, on the other hand, and this side, what is happening between Israel and Iran. So I think I will also tend to go along with both of you on this point. But before we go to the next question, I think Alka has a question. Alka?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so I'm really, this is the most horrible connectivity that I am facing here. So I just hope I can get my thing across. It's been really very fascinating listening to so many different aspects that have come up in these presentations and responses. See, I have a kind of a double-faced question. Okay, on the one hand, what we have heard is, especially the point that Ambassador Raghavan was making, that India has been ceding space to China, right? That it has, in fact, been detrimental for India to have moved out, as it were, from this narrative building, or even from the way in which it could have contributed to the developmental modernization. On the other hand, we are also saying that we do not have that kind of capacity. We do not have the deep enough pockets. We don't have that strategic heft. So in one sense, to say that we should not have conceded space is tantamount to saying that we could have done something, but we haven't. So how tenable is that given the far deeper pockets of China? So my question here is, as a consequence, and this has come out very clearly from both the speakers' presentations, as a consequence, it's not just Pakistan, but each of the neighbors of India and South Asia, which has now attempted to use China as leverage against India in different ways. It may not be a very blatant or very direct kind of way, but they have acquired that kind of leverage by pulling China deeper and deeper into economic, political, and strategic aspects in South Asia. Now, given this, wouldn't you say that one of the most direct ways in which India can actually reacquire some degree of maneuverability is by actually building fences with China, and that you reduce the scope for leverage by our neighbors by actually partnering with China and not making it as a kind of zero-sum contestation between India and China in this neighborhood? So that's really my question come comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alka. Ambassador Raghavan, please.
Well, it's not easy to answer, but I would say that we have to, be much more clinical about how we approach different situations. In some cases, the balance of advantage may simply lying not trying to compete with China all the time and burning yourself out. So where they have a overwhelming advantage in the supply of certain kinds of equipment, for instance, where if they have demonstrated that capacity in India itself, you can hardly compete to stop that from happening in one of your neighboring countries. But in other cases, there may be space for you to actually compete and win against China. In yet other possibilities, it may be possible for you to reach alliances with other countries. In the 1990s, for instance, or 1980s, we thought any kind of project assistance from any country was something against our interests in Bhutan or Nepal, in fact, in other neighbors also. Progressively, we have come around to the view that perhaps we can work with other countries in many countries in our neighborhood and thereby keep the Chinese out. And yet, yes, there may well be possibilities where you can work with the Chinese. I think you have to take a clinical view, primarily because this is not a tactical situation you are facing with China. The Chinese economy and the role which it is playing is a strategic role and is going to remain for a long period of time. You have to deal with it strategically and not in terms of policies on a day-to-day basis. So I don't rule it out. As I say, that we shouldn't burn ourselves out trying to compete with China on every front. But there are huge areas where you have such an overwhelming comparative advantage of your own, and you should be prepared to weigh in those areas. Similarly, to continue this chain, I think where regional cooperation is concerned, I don't think we should throw in the towel because of the irritants which Pakistan has always put up. I think it's a mistake to have done that, because in doing so, you have yourself created a vacuum.
Okay. Atul?
No, I tend to agree that, our policy cannot really be focused entirely on, keeping China out of our region. If we are focused on that, that is too difficult to manage. We can't, we have to have our own original approach and engage with the region. We need to be ready to take risks as China is taking the risk. China has involved itself in deep conflict zones everywhere. We need to be able to, take risk and enter and say our viewpoint, rather than just having a focus of keeping China out. If China buys Hambantota in Sri Lanka or invests in Hambantota, we need not to counter that by an airport over there. So that kind of a strategy is, I think we've been following that kind of a strategy for some time, and I think that is counterproductive over the long run. We need to engage on our own terms and irrespective of what China is doing in the region.
Okay. I mean, as Ambassador Raghavan said in reply to Alka's question, that sometimes, I mean, it's not just that you need to have your pocket full in order to have either alliances or, regional or multilateral cooperation, etc. I remember, but somewhere, I think the money does matter. That's why, I mean, it's money, honey, that operates really well in some cases. I remember when, for example, Quad was formed in its second avatar, and the immediate reaction in China was that the Chinese dismissed it actually. And even now, I don't see Chinese are even bothered about whether AUKUS or whether Quad. And one Chinese commentator had actually called Quad as beggars club. I mean, the four nations which had come together and formed Quad, and the Chinese had dismissed this thing as calling it a beggars club. And we have seen that Quad, and for that matter, even AUKUS, has had no impact on China whatsoever. So perhaps maybe it's an exaggeration to think of, instead of continuing to confront with China, even when it comes to South Asia, etc., and we should perhaps try to be more positive and, thinking of more cooperation with China in that sense. But I don't think even that will work. If that were the case, then perhaps China would have been advised to have no confrontation with America, for that matter, right? Anyway, so
I'll just add one point. You take the case of Haifa Port. Haifa Port, our businessmen have invested in it in a big manner. Similarly, Chinese have also invested in that. So if we are not afraid of investing in places where China has invested elsewhere, why should we, have that kind of impose that kind of a condition on ourselves in case of our neighborhood? This is a reality. China has expanded. China is there, but that should stop us from, engaging with the area.
Okay. I think we have exceeded the time allotted to us of 90 minutes. And it has been a very fascinating 90 minutes, as Alka said. And I hope we had more time to continue this discussion. But every good thing has come to an end. So we have to stop this discussion now. I once again take this opportunity to thank our two very distinguished panelists, Ambassador Raghavan and Dr. Atul Bhardwaj. With that, I announce the conclusion of today's event. Thank you very much to all the participants and to all those who asked questions and made our discussion even more lively and interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Hemant. Thank you, Ambassador Raghavan, and thank you, ICS.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Any vote of thanks?
Yes, so thank you, Chair. With this, we come to the end of today's seminar. We thank our speakers, Ambassador Raghavan and Dr. Bhardwaj, as well as our Chair, Dr. Adlaka, for gracing today's seminar with their presence and giving us their valuable time. We also thank the audience for joining us today. The video for today's discussion shall be available on ICS's YouTube channel. We would like to invite you to the upcoming Wednesday seminar scheduled for 16 July. Further information regarding the event can also be found on the ICS website. You may also subscribe to our newsletter for regular updates. Thank you for joining us today.
And thank you to
Thank
both.
you. Thank you.
Thank you to
Thank
both
you, sir.
Sheetal
Thank
and
you.
Nayanika. Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Thank you
sir.
so much.
Thank you to both
Bye-bye.
Sheetal and Nayanika.
Bye. Thank